Achoo! Got a cold brewing or worry about getting one? Before you buy a bunch of supposed cures, let's fact check them. Grandma's soup stays. Some trendy supplements? Not so much. I'll show you what actually reduces getting colds, trims cold time, what helps symptoms, and what to skip so you can feel better without wasting a dime. Welcome, my dear listeners, to episode 59, The Great Cold Remedy Audit. What survives scientific scrutiny? Is this you? Runny nose, sneezing, cough, congestion, sore throat, and just feeling rotten. It's that time of year, cold and flu season. On average, we get 2 to 3 colds per year. Over 200 respiratory viruses are out there. Rhinovirus is the most common cause of colds. Virus travels in little droplets through the air from one sick person to the next. Now, colds typically last 5 to 7 days, but cough can persist for weeks. Want to feel better? How about zinc, pseudoephedrine, echinacea, garlic, honey, chicken soup, or vitamin C? What works? What doesn't work? That's what we're going to talk about today. 3 parts. Part 1, can we reduce the number of colds that we get? And I'll review 8 possibilities. Part 2, can we reduce the duration of our cold? 5 items here. Part 3, can we reduce the symptoms of a cold? 3 items. Now, we could talk about many, many more, but there's not enough time. We'll focus on these 16. Okay, part 1. Can we reduce the number of colds that we get? Now, lots of things have been tried. There are no miracles here, but some may work a bit. Now, flu shots work for the flu, but not for cold. And they're only 40 to 50% effective at reducing the flu. How about vitamin C? In a Cochrane review of 29 studies and 11,000 people, there was a randomized trial comparing folks regularly taking vitamin C versus those who did not. And they found no benefit. But here is the wrinkle. 5 trials of marathon runners, skiers, and soldiers, there was a 50% reduction in colds in those taking the vitamin C. Now, could it be that the physical stress allowed the vitamin C to be more effective? Who knows? How about regular hand washing? Cochrane review, many clinical studies. It might help reduce the risk of a cold, especially around young kids who, as we know, are little virus magnets. Does garlic work? In a randomized trial, 120 people taking garlic versus no garlic for 90 days. There was no difference in the number of colds, but those taking garlic appeared to have a reduced severity of their symptoms, 21% fewer symptoms, symptom days, and work and school days missed. But you needed to take the garlic supplements all the time. How about gargling? In a randomized trial of 387 people who gargled 3 times a day with water or iodine water, perhaps there was a tiny benefit. Sorry, echinacea doesn't work. In a Cochrane review of 24 randomized trials, no benefit. Other than hand washing, there's not too much that helps us avoid a cold. But what did Grandma say that might give you a cold? Was she in fact right? Well, my grandma used to say, you will catch a cold if you don't get enough sleep. Well, in a study of 164 healthy people given a cold virus in their nose, and then they tracked For 7 days, they wore Fitbit-like devices to measure their sleep, and they looked at length of sleep, whether that related to the likelihood of catching a cold. Now, they thought 7 hours was an assess normal amount of sleep. If you got less than 6 hours of sleep, there was a 4-fold increased risk of getting a cold. 6 to 7 hours, no increased risk. Does it put you in a more susceptible state when you don't get much sleep, or does it let those quiet viruses make their move? Well, the grandma verdict meter, perhaps true. My grandma also said, don't go out in the cold without a jacket or you will catch a cold. Well, in a study of 180 subjects, a randomized trial of chilling their feet or not chilling their feet, and then they scored cold symptoms. 13 of 90 people who got the cold feet intervention, they got a cold, and only 5 of 90 if they stayed warm. So the theory is that cold feet leads the body to thermoregulation and vasoconstriction in the body and also in the nose. Another theory, when bacteria or viruses enter the nose, fluid sacs empty into the mucus, like kicking a hornet's nest. And that may have an antiviral effect. In a study, they took folks and put them in 40-degree temperature. The nose dropped by 10 degrees, and they looked at how the vesicles behaved. And there was a 40% drop in secretions. Grandma verdict meter? Perhaps true. Well, let's sum up part 1. Hand washing may help. Not getting enough sleep seems to be a problem. Keep your nose warm? Perhaps. On to part 2. Can we reduce the duration or severity of symptoms? Vitamin C. 7 studies looked at their therapeutic use. No benefit. How about zinc? In a meta-analysis of 7 randomized trials with 575 people, those who took zinc got over their cold 1 to 2 days faster. Now, you need to start the zinc within 24 hours and probably around 100 milligrams. So that seemed to work. Chicken soup. Was grandma right? Sadly, there are no clinical trials. But there is a lab study which showed a theoretical benefit. They tested chicken soup and key components of chicken soup in a lab. And they looked at the effect on white blood cell migration. And the chicken soup slowed it. So maybe that's how it works. The same author of that study later thought about chicken soup and COVID and added another factor, the concern of others to give you the chicken soup. So you might feel better because somebody was caring about you. Grandma verdict meter? Whatever you wish it to be. Another of grandma's wisdom, when you have a hoarse voice, you should whisper. Well, there was an interesting study where they looked at the vocal cords while people were speaking. They had 100 people. And there was 69% of the people had higher supraglottic hyperfunction, more vocal cord stress when whispering compared to normal speed. So whispering was worse, not better for those people. Grandma's truth verdict for whispering? Not so much. Prescription drug option, Tamiflu, but only for the flu, not a cold. And it might shorten your symptoms by 1 day, but you got to start it within 48 hours. All right, let's sum up part 2. Zinc may shorten colds and perhaps chicken soup too. On to part 3. Now you have a cold. What actually does or doesn't improve symptoms? How about Sudafed PE or Dayquil or Mucinex or Robitussin? The key components of many of these drugs is phenylephrine. And phenylephrine, we spend about $2 billion in sales and 240 million bottles each year. It's the most common oral decongestant. And there have been 5 randomized trials. Phenylephrine was no better than placebo. 2023, the FDA voted 16-0 that it's ineffective to take phenylephrine by the oral route. Might help if it's a nasal spray, but not orally. Pseudoephedrine, what is in Sudafed, not Sudafed PE, but Sudafed, does work. Strong evidence that it improves nasal congestion, 50% improvement. Now, the pseudoephedrine is behind the counter, and there's concern about its use in making methamphetamine, which is why it's behind the counter. How about honey? In a clinical trial of 105 kids with cough or cold, not less than 1 year old. That's a different situation. Honey 30 minutes before bedtime versus control, no honey, versus dextromethorphan, popular cold medicine. Guess what? It worked. Cough frequency was less, children sleep better, and parents' sleep improved. And there was a systematic review. Lots of not so great studies, but generally showed benefit. Will a humidifier help congested mucus or destroy cold virus? In a Cochrane review of 6 studies, 387 people, didn't help, although it didn't hurt either. All right, part 4, let's wrap up. It is really hard to reduce a cold. Hand washing seems helpful, but you can help your eyes by getting enough sleep, and you can decide whether being cold outdoors increases your risk. Also, it's hard to shorten the duration, but zinc, chicken soup, may help. Regarding symptom relief, save your money on any oral phenylephrine. Real pseudoephedrine works. And honey is a surprising cough winner. So, what is Dr. Bobby doing? I'm trying to get good sleep. I'm going to skip the other options to avoid a cold. When I do get sick, I will definitely consider honey for my cough. That's something new for Gail and I because I hadn't been aware of the studies that show it works. I will definitely take the real pseudoephedrine if I'm very congested. And chicken soup is always appreciated, placebo effect or not. May you live long and well, and I hope this cold season is kind to you. And I hope that you now have a few things to try and a few things to skip.